Way up to the front. Thank you all for coming tonight. This is our continuing series on media and entertainment. Tonight we're going to focus on analytics in the media space. It's an interesting topic and one that's constantly changing, given how fast the media industry itself is changing. Innovation, it seems, comes out weekly now with iPads and online magazines. So this is, I think, a really important and timely topic. Real quick, I'd like to thank our 2011 NITEC sponsors, Information Builders, Verizon, Google, TGP Associates, and the accounting firm of Eisner-Amper. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Citibank tonight for hosting us. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our panel. I'm going to start with Brian Morrissey, who's the editor-in-chief at Digiday. You all have his bio in front of you, so I won't read it, but I'll just turn the event over to Brian now. Thanks.
Cool, thanks a lot. I hope that's loud enough. Anyway, thanks a lot. I'm really excited for this panel. I think it's going to be really, it's an interesting topic and it's really timely at this point. But before we get started, let me just get a show of hands. I know you people usually hate doing this, but there's always like people that never raise their hand no matter what you ask them. But how many people are on the media side? So people who sell advertising and some, okay, a couple. How many on the agency side? And marketer side, technology side. See, there's like 10 hands unaccounted for. So we're gonna find you guys.
And we know who they are.
Find out what you do. We're gonna turn the microphones over to you. So I've been covering advertising for about a decade now, and my first job in my career was covering technology, and I remember clearly I had to write the story about hot swappable hard disk drives. So those of you in the technology world were like, oh, it's a big deal. But then I was like, oh my God, I gotta start covering advertising because advertising is much more understandable. But then something really weird happened and the internet did. And what we're seeing right now, I think, is the combination of technology and media. And there's this guy, Terry Kawaja, who's an investment banker. He calls this the scientification of media. And now that all media is becoming digital, these worlds are colliding that were mostly separate. The media world was all about, to a large degree, it was about a lot of magic and stuff like this, and now it's becoming a lot more science-based. So we're going to talk about what that means and how that changes what success looks like and how you measure that and think about that. So I'm going to start by going down the row, and I hope you guys will keep it to like sort of Twitter size, but larger. Sometimes this is also when you sort of lose control. So I'm going to start off with Justin Webster. He's the Executive Director of Product Development and Operations at the Wall Street Journal. I think if I get that right.
Yes, you did. And
okay.
I'm excited to go first because I'm usually with W. I'm usually last on the alphabet.
Yes.
So thanks.
We're going right to left.
Yeah. Yes, Justin Webster. Welcome, everyone. I spend most of my day as a product developer, building a lot of the great stuff that the Wall Street Journal Digital Network, rather the team that we have. Most of my job is really just spent wandering the halls. All kidding aside, my job at the Wall Street Journal is to help us build the best products possible. Products for us consist of certainly things like the WallStreetJournal.com, Barron's, MarketWatch, all things digital. And I know we'll cover some of this evening. As we start to move into new platforms, what does that mean for us? Well, it's things like iPad, things like iPhone, and now it's not just iPad, it's tablets. What do we need to do to measure that stuff? And I hope to. I'm actually very excited to be here tonight because I'm hoping I will learn some things from my colleagues and you, the audience. But I've had a very long career with News Corporation, been there a little over 12 years. Started here in New York City back in the mid-90s before being shipped over to Los Angeles. It seems like everybody that's spent any amount of time with News Corporation has at least spent some time in the LA offices doing various things, whether it was at the time with DirecTV or on our Fox Broadcast or movie division, before then being sent back to the East Coast to help our wonderful team at Dow Jones build great products. And of course, News Corporation means a lot of things to a lot of folks. For me, it's given me an opportunity to see a lot of great stuff in the digital media space. I've spent my entire News Corp career on the digital media side, helping both satellite, broadcast, terrestrial television, and of course internet production build great stuff, whether that was with Fox Sports, again DirecTV, Hulu. For those of you that aren't familiar with Hulu, it is a joint venture between News Corporation and NBC, though that has changed a little bit over the last few months since the Comcast deal, but was instrumental in building the Hulu.com destination property with Jason Kyler and his team as the News Corp assigned product manager. But other than that, I don't want to take up all the time, but I guess I'm the one outlier on the panel tonight in the sense that I don't manage our metrics team on a daily basis. We do have a wonderful team that does that. Kate Downey at the Dow Jones side, on the Dow Jones side, is responsible for gathering a lot of that information for both my product managers and our entire executive team. And I'm sure had she been able to make it tonight, she'd be sitting either on this panel or in the audience. Hope again to learn some fun stuff as we progress down.
So next we're going to go to Gregg Liebman. Gregg is the SVP of Ad Sales Research at CNN. So Gregg, give us a little idea of your day-to-day.
Sure. Well, right now my day-to-day is really interesting. We're in the middle of the TV upfront marketplace, and my group's job is to support the Ad Sales division for CNN, which is a little misleading because it's not just CNN TV, it's HLN, CNN Airport Network, CNN Online, the website, the mobile site, the apps, anything that's ad supported, our sales force is responsible for selling, and it's my job on a daily basis not only to keep them informed of trends and how we're performing, but also provide compelling reasons why marketers should not be buying CNN by platform, but purchase it via the content that we're offering. And the content is then distributed across platforms, so the challenge, and I'm sure we'll get into this over the next hour and a half, is measuring that usage across platform is certainly a challenge, and demonstrating the value to advertisers is certainly a challenge. But that's really my day-to-day responsibility, and I guess I look forward to talking more about it. I think it's interesting that Justin and I sit next to each other, so it's News Corp and Turner and CNN and Fox News, so it could get interesting, folks.
Okay, and last but not least, Leslie Garland, who I think has the most interesting and daunting title that anyone here, which is SVP of Digital Innovation at Kantar Media Intelligence. What does, I mean, that's a lot of pressure to be in charge of innovation. So what does that entail?
Yeah, I'd say, Leslie, with that title, you've got to contribute tonight. Right?
Yeah. It's that internet thing. I think it's going to happen. Yeah, so basically my responsibilities are within the intelligence sector at Kantar Media. Kantar Media is a pretty big company, and they do a lot of work not only in social media and mobile, but they actually measure online couponing and offline couponing. And then they also, like a Nielsen or a ComScore, rank and measure the various websites online in terms of who's going to those websites, how much time they're spending, what kind of content they're consuming, and that type of thing. So, but within intelligence, our main focus really is capturing all of the advertising activity that's taking place. So as ads are running on Wall Street Journal or any of the Turner and CNN properties, we're actually capturing those and then providing that across 3 million or plus brands in terms of being able to help the agencies, the advertisers, and media companies understand who's advertising not only online but across 21 media. So we cover a lot of traditional as well, but basically helping them understand what is the actual creative that's running, what are the flighting, what are the flights, what are the schedules, how many impressions, where is it running within certain TV programs or on certain websites, and then how much media investment is being allotted to those different media types. So kind of what's the share of voice across this 21 media. So the things that we're really thinking about right now, obviously, is better measurement of video advertising and sort of what are the metrics around spend. So one of the things I'm tasked with is, it's not just spend anymore in terms of dollars or impressions, but what else are interesting metrics around those particular data points. So for instance, with video, is it engagement? Do people watch the entire ad? Did they interact with the ad? With social, did they actually like the ad? Did they dislike, thumbs up, thumbs down? Did they actually share or post that ad? And then obviously, mobile is huge, a huge focal point for us as well. So those are the sort of innovative things that I'm tasked with and my team is looking at in terms of 2012, 2013 footprint. Yeah.
So cool. So Justin, I want to start with you with just sort of, maybe we'll just do this sort of a big picture thing before we get into the nitty gritty. With obviously we've gone from the analog to the digital era, and this has led to this proliferation of different media. What is the biggest challenge that poses to your organization and your within the product team? I mean, we've gone from a fairly simple situation to a far more complex one.
Sure. I mean, providing the whole picture for our audience. It's gone, as you said, sort of analog, digital, website to what? No longer are, particularly at Dow Jones, are we just responsible for printing the Wall Street Journal. We're also responsible now for serving up a website. We're responsible for putting our content on tablet products. We're responsible for getting our products on mobile. It's really, you've got audiences, regardless of where you're building products, looking at your stuff anywhere and everywhere. What does that mean for us? It is a big challenge for us. And I was joking with a colleague before the panel started in that we've got all of these great new products that are launching out the door here over the next few months, and there's always that lag between the launch of a new product and getting any measurement back from it. And that's scary because you've got an executive team that's looking at these great big products being kicked out the door, and tomorrow they want to know how many people looked at it. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have is how do we measure that? How do we get that really good granular detail on products that are brand new? Where in some cases, if you're working with an Omniture or a Localytics, they don't even have a software development kit yet ready to help you measure that. And so there are some scary moments in my job where we kick something out there and we'll go a few weeks and we don't know. And of course, we've been somewhat fortunate in the sense that a lot of the new products we've launched over the last year and a half have been hugely successful for us. But we didn't launch them with any clear indication as to whether they would be successful.
Mm-hmm. So, Greg, you want to pick up on that and talk a little bit about the challenges this kind of fragmentation, poses on, on your side, on the research side?
Well, I can take a couple different angles with that. I mean, from a research perspective, all these different new platforms require new measurement, and it's a challenge to measure each of those. But I'm going to focus a little bit on the supporting ad sales. And for us, it's a challenge to demonstrate the value and the impact of an ad on these new devices and really try to not have these new platforms cannibalize traditional media, especially when a lot of them don't offer the same premiums that we're getting with our TV products. So showing the cross-platform value to an advertiser, which I think we're doing a very good job of, but it's certainly a challenge. Utilizing Nielsen, doing fine custom studies. If advertisers spend a certain amount of money, we're willing to demonstrate the value in terms of brand lift and purchase intent, etc. It's a major challenge. And the last thing I'll touch on, and this is something that keeps me up at night, is not getting bogged down too much in the new exciting digital media and not allow that to occupy too much of your time and lose focus on the big picture. Mm-hmm. So CNN has great scale across both TV, online, mobile. I mean, I have numbers that'll blow you away, but in terms of revenue, we're still TV-driven medium. And the resource allocation across all these different platforms is an ongoing challenge.
So not just chasing the bright, shiny object.
Right. And because there's not as much data and information, there's a learning curve that also takes up a lot of the bandwidth as well. And you know, I have limited resources, so it's a balancing act.
Right. Leslie, you want to talk about that sort of challenge? I mean, you touched on it a little bit in your opening.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of 2 points from a research company perspective. Number one is, you know, Justin talked about getting these things out the door and then getting data back in terms of how they're performing faster. So that's one of our big charges is, you know, kind of where do you dance on the line in terms of making sure that that data that comes back is you know, worthy. It has sample behind it supporting it. It's representative. You know, it's distributed demographically correctly. Those types of things. So we're looking at that as well as trying to come up with and develop additional platforms to be able to get that data back to our clients in a much faster fashion, and also in a format that can speak to some of the tools and things that they've developed in terms of filtering that data out to the different organizations that need it within their companies. So that's a huge challenge. It's just, you know, the ARF the last couple of days, and that was something that was brought up time and time again, and a lot of the sessions was, you know, we need data faster, we need it to be across several different platforms that speak to our media buying and selling platforms, our research data platforms, things like that, and then sort of still be able to kind of chase the data on the shiny objects too, in terms of, okay, well, what would be meaningful to the industry in kind of phase one, and then sort of what can we do in phase two. So that's a big challenge for us and something that, you know, we've been working on. It was a big initiative for 2011, and will, you know, continue to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Greg, I want to go to you. I mean, you mentioned the upfronts, and obviously TV or network went first, and it was, you know, I think it surprised people.
Yep. Can I correct you? Broadcast went first.
Broadcast went, sorry. Broadcast went first, and then
it's a one TV world.
Yeah, one TV. Well, I mean, eventually we'll get to the sort of video world, and people talk about it, but we're not quite there yet. Maybe
we're getting close.
We're getting close. But I think a lot of people, they see the time spent. I'm always shown this graph, you know, over the years, and it shows. I'd love for your research perspective. Like, it shows the time spent with the media, and then the percentage of budget spent. And there's always this huge gap where between the amount of time spent and digital media, particularly the internet, and the amount of budget spent by brands there. And the unspoken or spoken assertion is these two things have to meet, and, you know, TV spend has to come down. Why is that a bad chart, or is it a good chart?
Well, it's a reality, and, you know, it's a great question. I can only give you my perspective, having worked both on the agency side and on the media side. But it's an exciting industry to be part of, but it moves at a snail's pace. So the broadcast networks, you know, up until a few years ago, was still getting the lion's share of the national TV dollars, when cable had the largest share of viewing. And you see the same thing now with digital, where advertisers are very comfortable with what they've had experience with, and they'll test it out and they'll put some money, but until things get proven to them, and the ROI of any medium is very challenging, as we all know. I think it's going to be a continual slow evolution. I mean, I think it will catch up at some point, but I don't see a dramatic shift in the trends that have been consistent probably for 20 years.
I mean, is that mostly a metrics challenge, or is that a culture challenge, or is that both? I mean, you know, the old saying is like, no one got fired for buying TV.
Yeah, I think the metrics issue is a smokescreen for the cultural issue. I think that, you know, I'll go out on a limb and say this because I've worked on the agency side. It's a lot easier to put a lot of your dollars on the broadcast networks or on TV, because you just made your job a lot easier. You know, 2/3 of that pie of what you have to allocate was just, you know, handled. And you don't have to justify. Your clients aren't asking, why did you buy CNN, or why did you buy ABC or TNT? They are asking why you're supporting these new products and services that they're less familiar with. So I think that the agency is a little risk averse. I think the client's a little risk averse. I think brand managers, but I think the average brand manager is in that position on working their brand for 3 years, so it's a very short-term mentality, and I definitely think it's culturally driven.
Okay. So Justin, you're building these new products.
Yeah.
Is that a big problem? Because I mean, there's, I think it was what Jeff Zucker said. We don't want to trade, analog dollars for digital pennies, and I mean, we're up in nickels.
Yeah, maybe. I love having a TV guy next to me because this is a topic of conversation that we are all having, especially if you're in doing online video, digital media video. There's this very measurable element to online media where we know an awful lot about our customers. We probably don't know everything we want to know about our customers, but we know a ton. And in many respects, we know a lot more about the customers that are viewing our content at any given minute than the television broadcaster knows about their viewer. And I think right now we're in this...
Can I just add an example? I mean, on the online space, actually who was exposed to the actual ad in TV. We now move to C3, but it's not your advertised specific ad, it's the average of all the ads in that program. So it's much more precise in the online space than in the TV space.
Right, and it's interesting, right? Because you sort of have this direct marketing correlation on the web side, and there's none of that on the broadcast side. And I know in my time with my television colleagues, we used to joke a lot about Nielsen ratings and the fact that as broadcasters we've kind of assumed over the last 30, 40 years that there's a flawed element to that, but we've all agreed, and therefore it works.
A lie everyone agrees with.
Right, exactly. And on the digital media side, we don't have that wall. It's essentially walking around nude all the time. And that is a tough thing to navigate when you've got a great piece of video content that can be distributed on millions and millions of devices. And I say millions now, we start talking about internet-connected devices where you're going over the top, you're leveraging the infrastructure that has been put in the ground or hung on wires over the last 20 years. And I can get a great broadcast out. Probably doesn't compete with Gregg's CNN, but it's a pretty good-looking broadcast. But I'm not bringing the same dollars that the broadcast side is.
So how do you square that? I mean, that you're obviously consumer habits are shifting, but if all things were equal, you would rather have people consume this content through traditional vehicles.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the dirty little secret is that we're out there producing high definition content that's perfectly capable of being distributed via terrestrial, cable, or satellite. We've chosen not to do that because there's a huge investment there that we don't want to make, and we can't afford it. Regardless of who our parent company is, we are not prepared to spend the billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars to deploy our content the traditional route. But that being said, we're still, you're sort of, as a digital media guy, you're put up on that pedestal because the measurable data that comes in is so granular. And I love having this conversation because we're both the broadcast side and the digital IP carriage side. We're all sort of marching from opposite ends. We are going to meet in the middle here at some point.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and don't forget that, I mean, a lot of the new devices, whether it's the tablet or others, everything is sort of interacting together. You're watching TV, but you're on your iPad on Facebook talking to your friends about The Voice from last night, or The Bachelorette, or so there's a lot going on in terms of the interaction, and I don't think, I know, Brian, one of your questions was, we talk a lot about online, but what's the future of TV? Yeah. And yet everybody's still sort of utilizing all of these new shiny devices as what to interact with and kind of create a more interesting experience in terms of viewing TV.
Yeah.
So, and I know, from the research side, we're looking at, cross-media has never been bigger. So we're looking at how people are interacting with different media, how is it working together, how is it not, what are they going to, maybe with a mobile or online device for certain aspects of that experience versus versus one for another. So you know, how video and TV are working together, how are dollars shifting, how are promotions sort of you know, combined in terms of sales programs and things like that. I was just out on the West Coast last week and met with, you know, a pretty big social media company that we all know, and you know, part of their entire sales strategy is geared toward branding, and what's mentioned in those posts online, and how that sort of correlates and integrates with what's going on in terms of the actual TV content or ads. So even the pure play digital companies that have no broadcast parent or have no print parent for that matter are still thinking about how those traditional media types work and affect what they're doing. So
yeah, I think it's funny because I think like social media could like kind of save appointment viewing in many ways, because
That's true.
you can TiVo something, but then you know, if you TiVo Glee, you don't have that experience of interacting with everyone else around.
Right.
Glee.
Right.
You want to be part of the conversation. That's
Part of that
taking place.
experience.
So, I mean, Greg, from what you're seeing, I remember like, what was it, like 5-6 years ago, it was like the death of the 30-second spot, and all this stuff like this. And I run into,
TiVo, you remember TiVo?
yeah, I run into Joe
There's an
Jaffe.
article today where the CEO of TiVo said, we are not in the DVR business. And I didn't actually read the whole article. I'm trying to figure out what business are they in. They are selling, they're selling data. They've become a research business to some degree,
Yeah.
based on their panel.
But I mean, are you not seeing the data that, you know, obviously we have a proliferation of devices, we're spending a lot of time looking at our phones, we have iPads and stuff like this, that it is not taking time away from television, or just not enough?
No, it's actually very clear. Nielsen produces an annual report. It's called the 3-screen report, how people are consuming media. And year after year, over the last 5 years, actual average hourly TV consumption is increasing. I mean, that's the key metric, is how much are people watching TV. It's actually not declining. Now, I think Leslie makes a good point. The way people experience TV is changing. They're definitely more multitasking. I don't think there's enough research out there about attention and engagement. It's something very hard to get at. Turner Research believes a lot in biometric research. We've worked with Inoscope and Neurofocus. We're opening a media lab in the Time Warner Center on the 3rd floor, so come by in about 6 months and check it out, which will have a, let's see if I can do this justice, because I saw the floor plan, so it's pretty impressive, but there'll be a biometric monitoring area, there'll be a
So what are you doing in this biometric?
Well,
I'm interested in.
I can, yeah.
No, don't hook me up or anything, but just describe it.
Well, it used to be like this helmet, and then it was a vest, and now it's just a belt. So it's not as sci-fi as it might sound. But if I could take a few minutes, we did this, I think we did a pretty impressive social media study using biometrics. So the hypothesis was that CNN content that's shared is more valuable to advertisers with that implicit recommendation than if the same content was consumed regularly. And we have the ability, through the omniture data, to know who is coming into the site from social media destinations. So can we sell that inventory at a premium because the engagement level is higher? If you ask people that question, which we did in these focus groups, everyone says the same thing. Nope. No difference. If I'm consuming it, if I'm reading an article or watching a video and it came through a recommendation or I found it on my own and choose to view it, you know, my engagement's the same. So you need to go to a biometric firm that actually measures the subconscious, and we saw lifts of 500% between the test group and the control group. For those that aren't that familiar with it, they wear this biometric belt. It measures heart rate and skin rate, and I can't speak, you know, that intelligently. It's a bit of voodoo science, but some of my colleagues have certainly vetted it, and we do believe in it, and it makes sense. So we're a big believer with internal research. My boss is Jack Blackschlag, who is, you know, very outspoken on this issue of not relying on survey-based research. I mean, we need behavioral-based research. And if you ask people questions about their media consumption or future purchases, you're going to get answers. Those don't necessarily speak to what's really happening. And we see a major difference between the behavioral and the survey.
Mm-hmm. So Justin, what are you finding with, I mean, obviously, you know, you're bringing out a lot of new products and a lot of different, where are you seeing like the biggest levels of engagement in these like new channels? I mean, because you're spread all over the place now.
Right. Well, you know, I think the engagement for us is certainly, particularly when you start looking at the Wall Street Journal, for example, you still have a huge print side. And in many respects, the Wall Street Journal looks a little bit like CNN, where you have, you know, this big broadcast behemoth. The analogy there is our print paper. And we have this fantastic digital media side, and CNN.com in that analogy. And you know, right now, as we're seeing dollars move around, both from the agency side and on the spending and consumer habits, you know, it's almost gotten to a point where, you know, the print side is, you know, hanging on. You got the digital media side hanging on. As separate businesses, you know, they're okay. They're not super fantastic on either side, but you put both of them together and you've got a great business. And so our consumers, you know, we still do a bang-up business on the print side. It's still one of our biggest commodities. But the digital media side is growing, you know, by double digits yearly. And you know, that means a lot, right? Every year that we can grow that audience, you know, better ad dollars. We also have a very premium audience, which is helpful, and says a lot for the core product offering. But as we see customers moving back and forth, I'll take a customer however I can get it. I would prefer to have a digital customer, frankly.
Wait, why is that? You make more money.
Exactly, right? You know, if we. And I'd probably get slapped around by my boss Todd Larson for saying this, but you know, if we could shut down the print business, you know, it saves costs in print and trucking those things out to customers versus, you know, being able to take and utilize the 2,000 journalists that we have sitting around the globe and writing great or reporting on great content or reporting on news and getting that out there via digital media. Much cheaper for us in the long run, but doesn't, you know, dilute the product offering at all.
So if I could just jump in, CNN's in a very unique situation where our digital audience is not necessarily our TV audience. I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but we have this offering, we're able to go to advertisers and say, buy us across platform, and that will extend your reach. So CNN.com skews a little bit younger, CNN TV skews a little bit older. We do have unique users of each medium, but it's unlikely someone goes to WallStreetJournal.com that isn't a Wall Street Journal reader or former reader. So it's one unique way we're able to sell CNN across platform and also grow revenue by growing the audience base.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point, and one of the reasons why our business has started focusing more attention on the video play. For that very reason, can we get a product out there that touches a slightly younger audience? Because for the same reason, if we can go to an advertiser and say, you know what, you can buy both print and digital, but we also have this video offering, and it increases reach, fantastic.
Yeah.
Listen, I want to talk a little bit, because as it goes from just having a sort of traditional offering to then a website, to then it becomes, you know, iPad, it becomes mobile, and all these other things, and then video, online. I noticed that there's always this tendency to come up with new measurements in the sort of digital space, as opposed to, and it's like, no, we can measure this, so we will, and stuff like this. But then the cost that comes is, it complicates things. It adds a cost into itself.
Yeah.
I don't know, how do you see that sort of being balanced? And we see in online videos, some people say, let's just go to a GRP, and other people say, wait, no, the GRP is screwed up. Why would we want to do that?
Yeah, well, I think there's this, you know, search for a common currency within the interactive world that we've, I think, across all of our experience, probably have touched it at some point on different council committees and so forth, trying to figure it all out. And in the 15 years I've been in the business, we still haven't quite gotten there yet. But I think there's a few metrics that sort of everybody leans to, I think, the fact, you know, I think there's a point in there that the fact that traditional media has not gone away, because even in the digital world, although we have all these metrics, and sometimes all of these metrics can be kind of an enemy of ourselves, but because you know, there's the lie that we believe in terms of TV ratings, and you know, there's a lot of somewhat same metrics.
As a researcher, you know, I might take exception to that.
But in the print world, impressions,
You should too.
Yes. You know, in print, there's impressions. I mean, there are some similar metrics that cross lines as well. So I think, you know, there have been some metrics that have sort of risen to the top as far as, you know, metrics that we all look at, no matter whether it's digital or TV or print or other radio or other media. So I think we're all still sort of striving toward what.
But then people chase after like the latest thing, right? And they say, oh no, it's going to be about cost per engagement.
Well, but I think there are supplemental metrics around some of those key metrics, like we were just talking about video. You know, it's not just, okay, do we think about video as a GRP compared to TV? Do we not? But then there are other metrics that we can measure in the digital world that we can't necessarily measure in the broadcast or the print world in terms of actual interaction with that ad. You know, did people watch the entire ad? So, you know, did they only view a portion of it and close out? So within social media, it's much more than did they just get exposed to the ad? You know, was it something that they posted or shared with friends? You know, what was sort of the viral, you know, performance or implications for that ad? So there's other metrics within the digital world that I think we should be looking at. Maybe they're supplemental. Maybe they're not necessarily, you know, the key currency, but I think they all sort of provide context around whatever it is even from a key performance indicator that we're trying to measure. You know, does it drive people to actually go out and buy that P&G Bounty paper towel roll? You know, does it drive people to go out and buy more Coke Zero? Does it drive people to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal? So I think, you know, there's effectiveness, there's engagement metrics that should be and probably will find their way into kind of that key set of currency.
I have a perspective on this, and it's born from frustration a little bit. This whole industry, the whole media industry, is really essentially, from a business perspective, is serving marketers and advertisers. And yet, when it comes to measurement issues, they're rarely seen or heard. So we were just at the ARF, I don't know, it was over 1,000 people. 1 to 2% were actually advertisers, you know, maybe 5%, I don't know, you know, the numbers. And they're not stepping up to the plate and demanding the type of research that they need to assess their campaign, what they're spending across media. They're not buying CNN and CNN.com and CNN Mobile. They're buying the CNN Heroes package. Hopefully you guys are all familiar with our award show celebrating everyday heroes. I spent a little too much time with the sales group, so bear with me. And they buy that package, and that package is across platform. And they want to see it measured in a certain way, but they're not a voice in the industry really pushing the industry forward.
What's the ideal way they want to have that measured?
They want to know across every platform that content was placed, who was exposed, how many times, when they were exposed. Ideally, they want to know what impact that has on sales, but you can't always get what you want, because unfortunately for us, well, the reality is they might be buying the CNN Heroes package, but they're also buying 20 other cable networks, 3 or 4 broadcast networks, print, radio, out of home. So to tease out the individual effect of one media to sales is asking a lot. But they're not. They're more media agnostic than the research companies are, the agencies are, and the publishers. You know, and they're the ones I think they need to step up and sort of bring the industry together.
Right.
And just to follow up on that, we've had a similar issue very recently as more of our consumers are taking our content and putting or reading or consuming it on tablet products. The new metric that we want to know is what's offline viewing look like. that's awfully hard to measure too. But it ends up sort of, taking a lot of what we've just discussed here the last couple of minutes and sort of throwing it in a bucket and stirring it around. When you start talking about offline viewing, it's sort of Nielsen and print and digital media all rolled up into one. And how do you get the information to essentially beam back home so you can get an understanding of what the customer is doing when they're not, tied in?
So theoretically, you can measure everything, but it's just getting even more murky.
Yeah, right. In some respects, yes.
So speaking of murky, I wanted to touch a little bit on the aspect of social media and how you measure that. You talked about measuring different things, measuring whether someone recommends it or something. We're seeing a lot of brands, trying to accumulate likes and Twitter followers and stuff like this. I don't know. Leslie, have you been doing sort of research on how and what are the sort of key metrics when it comes to social media?
Yeah, actually, one of our sister companies within Kantar, Symphony, is a social media listening and monitoring company. And so we've actually had some conversations with them in terms of what are sort of the key metrics or information our clients would like to know around the advertising or the brand integration or product placement that is involved with social media. So at the intelligence sector at Kantar, we ourselves have been actually spidering quite a few different social media sites to actually pick up the creatives. We know what creatives are on that page. We know, obviously who the advertisers are on that page. And what we'd like to do is sort of tie in with the different metrics we can calculate in terms of impressions and how much spend is taking place for a specific advertiser, but then also take it a step further and somehow measure, I guess you'd call it the viral or the halo effect in terms of, is that ad being posted on YouTube? Is it being shared via email? Is it being embedded in a Facebook page? Things like that. So we're just now starting to kind of dig in and see what it is that we can measure ourselves as opposed to going outside the company. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely something our clients are asking for, specifically our agency clients. They're trying to figure out how social media, in terms of that line item on the media plan, does it justify itself? I was at a conference, this was last year, and the CMO of Kodak, I think he said, when you can put a dollar amount on ignoring social media, then I will, but right now, basically, my brand needs to have all of the social media marketing, vehicles that it should. So whether that's Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, it needs to be there, and we'll take what measures we can get at this point.
So Greg, what does it mean? What does it mean? I mean, CNN is one of the more popular. I think you guys probably been one of the most popular Twitter accounts outside of Bieber. And
Yeah, we're the top three fluctuates.
Okay, yeah, you'll never catch Bieber. But what does this mean for your business? I mean, you don't make any sort of money off being really popular on Twitter. It drives some users back to where you can monetize them. How do you look at all of that engagement?
Well, we look at it a lot of different ways. First of all, it is a way to have a conversation with our users, which is a great thing. It is a way for our content to get distributed. I mean, essentially, Twitter is a delivery mechanism, and it's a great way on air, using Twitter and other devices, to bring the conversation that's occurring online on air. So we've been a leader in that space. Back in the 2008 election, we had a YouTube debate where it was the first time everyday people were able to ask questions to the candidates. We had this Facebook inauguration partnership that had, I forget what the numbers were, I don't want to misrepresent it, but at the time it was the largest usage of Facebook in their history. But from an ad sales point of view, if I can just bring us back to that for a second, we're taking a very interesting approach to social media. So, as Leslie mentioned, advertisers are now allocating money to social media. And when you think of social media, you think of social media networks. So the money is going to, what, two places. It's going to Facebook and MySpace. We're going out to media planners and advertisers saying there's a better place or another place that you can place on that money. and that social media, social networks, is basically the pipes and engine that fosters a conversation, right? And what are people often talking about? Well, they're talking about news. And the content that people are sharing in social media is another place to take the value and opportunity of social media and engage with consumers by placing your ads in that content that people are consuming, not just the place where the sites that are aggregating the people.
So you're gathering all, on a metric standpoint,
Yes.
you're gathering all of the sharing data about CNN content.
Yep.
And that's sort of what you're basing it on.
I mean, we have a lot of internal data that provides us with how much of our content is shared, which of our content is shared more than others. I would say parts of our site, 10% of our usage comes via sharing, which is a lot. Just to give you some scale, we do 1.5 billion page views a month on CNN.com, and on some of the sections, up to 10% of that is coming in through referrals through social media. So it's a bit of a tough sell for us to go out there and convince people, you know, that there's a role for the content to play in that space in terms of going after those dollars. But we've definitely seen some success early on.
Okay. I want to open it up to questions in a little bit, but so we're going to find the people who didn't raise their hands, and then we're going to go first. But I want to start with Justin, and we'll just go down. Like, if there was sort of one or two things that you think, you know, need to sort of change with measuring all of this messy world, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've talked about it a lot. One of my pain points most immediately in my day job right now is really it's going to be on the video side. It's you know, I've got our ad sales team out there, you know, saying, you know, we want to have the 15 and 30-second spots. Got to make room for it. And you know, and we were joking about, you know, the 30-second spot is dead. Well, it clearly is not. And it's not dead because we want to, as publishers, we want to make it easier for advertisers to come and spend money with us. And the best way for us to do that is take what they're already using out there in the broadcast world and essentially regurgitate it. You know, so one of the challenges, can we be innovative in that space and create products that, you know, help advertisers get their messages out there, but again, also being able to measure that. I mentioned the other one too, sort of this concept of offline measurement. Don't really know what that means yet, but as more and more of our products are encouraging people to essentially plug in before they go to bed and wake up in the morning with, you know, a downloaded version of the Wall Street Journal, and they unplug from the network, how do we measure what they're looking at? You know, and so I think that's going to be a huge challenge for us over the next, I don't know, year, 18 months, as folks, and there will be folks out there that solve this. We clearly want to be one of them. But again, as more folks are downloading and consuming content, it's going to be a big issue.
Okay. Greg?
I have a long list of wants. Let's see, I want at work media consumption to be measured better. Obviously it benefits CNN, but there's a lot of media now occurring in the workplace. I'm not sure if everyone even realizes that the Nielsen panel is a household panel, it's not a person's panel. So they're measuring the home. Well, that was great in 1980 when, you know, all your video consumption took place in the home.
But I think you said Nielsen was all true.
I don't think I said it's all true. I just said it's not a lie.
Okay.
There's a lot of gray area between not a lie and
all right, we'll move on.
You mean they don't completely make it up?
they don't completely make it up. Thank you for the help.
I used to work for Nielsen technically, so I can say that.
You know, there's a lot of video consumption that's going unmeasured outside the home, and for me, that's a major issue and something that's not getting the attention it should.
Okay, Leslie?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, from the research point of view, I know one thing that a lot of companies within the space are working on, especially in interactive, is direct measurement or working with the publishers and the ad networks and the portals to do the best they can to tag their content, because there's so many metrics and information that can be passed back on a faster basis if they can do that.
So what would the implication for that?
So basically, I mean, I guess as a researcher, one of the requests we have is that the interactive community, in terms of the publishers, the ad networks, and the portals, actually implement these beacons and tags. There's obviously privacy issues and things that we certainly wouldn't collect or pass here and there. But to be able to get the viewership data, the consumption data, the interaction, overlay a panel with that to give some demographics as well as psychographic information on who's viewing the video and other content would be great. There's a lot of publishers, I think including both up here, that are doing that now, but there's also a lot of publishers and ad networks and even ad-serving platforms that aren't necessarily willing. And I think that would help the marketplace in a huge way in terms of addressing some of the metrics and analytics that we're already looking for. But in addition to that, to actually give the marketplace some things that maybe they haven't thought about, and to be able to tie in with offline and some of the other types of measurement that we're looking at.
Yeah, Leslie, I actually, my colleague, Kate Downey, I hear that from her team all the time. The product team is constantly hounded on, make sure you tag everything correctly. And we still have those basic measurements that we've had for years are still going to follow us in the long run, but you have to use those basic measurements and the tools that are provided you correctly. And yeah, I hear that a lot from
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more opportunity for other metrics, as I mentioned earlier, that would be maybe complementary or supplemental to those, but could really start to round out the picture in terms of who's viewing, what are they doing while they're viewing, are they interacting, just a boatload of other types of information and insights that I think are really key.
Is there any concern, we did this without ever discussing privacy, but just very quickly, not like forever, but that, that any sort of regulations will make it harder to actually figure all of this out?
Yeah, I mean, tying an actual cookie or piece of information back to an individual, allowing for that individual to then be, included in selling of information or retargeting of information, things like that, can dance on that privacy line and actually cross it. So those are things that we definitely don't want to do. But at an aggregated level, meaning categorizing those groups of people, looking at them, kind of in the old ways we did. I was a brand manager at Dr. Pepper 7-Up for about 4.5 years, and I used to pore over those MRI reports about soccer moms and, upper class blue bloods and things like that. But being able to even look at it from that level, I think would be really helpful. So there's a lot we can do at the aggregate level that we don't necessarily have to get into, person level.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's the wild card. It could change the industry dramatically. I mean, all this discussion on set-top box data, or incorporating shopper card data with media consumption. I mean, there's all these great, exciting initiatives, and some change in legislature, and all those businesses died on the vine. So it's scary, and I'm a little concerned. I worked at DoubleClick for a little blip, and it was when
Abacus?
No, it was right before the bubble burst and then right after. So I had these visions of my own private island, and then I was unemployed. I remember it well. And privacy helped sink that company. Well, not sink, I shouldn't say sink, but
Turned out okay.
Took a step back.
No, but I mean, the stuff that they got in hot water with was this company Abacus, this catalog company. And the stuff they were doing, I mean, it would be like nothing today. I mean, the stuff people are doing out there is...
Well, that's what I'm afraid of, is that, what's going under the radar a little bit, and I think we all benefit from it, marketers and research companies and media publishers, but it could change very dramatically, very quickly.
Okay. So on that note, I want to open it up for questions. You did keep track of who didn't raise their hands, right? So We'll go with the volunteer first.
I have a question for Justin. I'm
Sure.
an avid Wall Street Journal reader of your print product. And Greg touched upon this before. To what extent do you see cannibalization of the print product by your online product?
Yeah, no, great question, and it's a topic of conversation that you can probably imagine goes on quite a bit in the 1211 office. There's probably a sort of a two-way, you can think about it two ways. One, would love, and I mentioned this earlier, I've heard a lot of our executive team over the years, well, the last 2 years at least, since I've been on board, talk a lot about moving folks from print to digital. Clearly, that would be interesting from a cost perspective. From a cannibalization standpoint, interestingly enough, if we use the iPad as an example, the iPad has actually been a huge success for us in subscriptions. And these are people that want to read the journal but don't want to carry around the print edition of the paper, but have signed up strictly for that portability. So we're actually seeing less cannibalization than you might expect, because we're now providing the journal on products that we didn't a year ago. And that's actually helping bolster where you might have seen some cannibalization of the two properties. But we treat both of them essentially the same in the sense that it is a subscription product. So you've got to pay us money to either read the print edition or log on to the website and
Do you see more growth in the digital product?
Yes, we do.
Just to touch on that a little bit, just to give you an idea of how much growth there needs to be in media measurement. We can't answer that question for CNN. I mean, there's not a single source panel of TV and digital where we can track over time. I mean, Nielsen has now added PC measurement to its TV panel, but just literally over the last couple of months. But we don't have longitudinal data where we can see CNN viewership, CNN.com usage, and see the cannibalization. So it was still really at the early stages of really understanding some very great and fundamental questions.
I mean, I know from my television background, that was always the holy grail, if we could take a web property and actually boost numbers on broadcast.
Right.
I can remember vividly David Hill, who was the chairman at Fox Sports, saying, build me a web property that can move Nielsen numbers.
Yeah.
Really hard to measure that.
It is very hard to measure that, and within the news, it's a very different experience watching a broadcast versus picking and choosing the stories of interest and coming in and out of our digital properties. They work very well together, but the cannibalization of the two is something we can't answer. I mean, we also can't say more people are consuming CNN across any platform than they did last year or the year before or ever in our history, because that data just simply doesn't exist. And it's baffling to a lot of people who aren't in the trenches like I am, but to this day, there's still not that single source behavioral measurement across platform that allows us to do it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, he's closer.
Hi, good evening. We can see a trend where more and more paywall is introduced. We can see the Wall Street Journal has some paywall. I don't know what's the plan for CNN Online, but maybe can you give me a hint on where the trend is going? Is it, can we think that in 5 years from now, everything will have to be paid for? Just, some ideas on where you see this trend going. Times is about to introduce a paywall. I'd like to hear the insight of the panel on this topic.
It's interesting because CNN had experimented.
Yes,
with,
and actually, I actually think there's a good conversation to be had here, because my team has spent an enormous amount of time looking at CNN's numbers over the last, say, 8, 9, 10 years from a video perspective, because CNN is certainly the clear leader in digital video distribution, and for years has tried various routes of getting a paywall in front of customers. And I think it was a year ago or so where that kind of was pushed down a bit.
Well, I think you're referring to the app. So I think when the app first came out, we charged for the app, and now it's a free app.
And I can remember some broadband products.
Wasn't it like CNN Pipeline?
There was a CNN Pipeline, which very good.
Yeah.
People knew about
That's the problem.
that failed.
That Twitter went around.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I think it's anyone's guess where this is headed. I think, we're in a much different business. We're a video-based broadcast business, which is healthy. But the print business needs to be able to replace their revenue on these new digital platforms, and they're going to keep experimenting with different ways to do that. Otherwise, their long-term viability is in question. And I think there's a place for paid content for when it's quality content. I think what we're seeing is CNN, Wall Street Journal, some of the traditional journalism is gaining more respect or impact because of all the information that's out there in the blogosphere. Our content is gaining in value with all that competition and noise.
Yeah. So Justin, from a product perspective, I'm interested. Do you design, because I mean, it's very interesting because all of these subscription products, you want to have people pay, at the same time you don't want to give up all the social media stuff you're passing around. So, you used to just kind of like, I probably shouldn't tell everyone this, but if you just like copy the Wall Street Journal headline and put it in Google News, you will get the thing for free.
Yeah, and we're going to shut that down. We're actually working on that.
Are you? Because there's actually, I was wondering if you've seen this, because I wrote about this, and there's a browser add-on that if you go to the Wall Street Journal and click on one of these subscribe stories, it automatically takes you to a Google News search, and then it's about a 2-second little delay where you see this happening, and then the story pops up for free.
With the New York Times too.
Yes, and NY Clean.
Yeah.
I don't use any of these things.
No, and in fact, I'll have to go look at my...
You should just go to CNN because it's all free. It's all
Yeah. No, are you seeing this? Are you guys seeing this as a problem yet? Or
no, there's a very small subset of the reader community that's out using those. No, it's actually been out a while. I mean, we have started to see
broadcasting this on CNN right now.
Great. Thank you, Brian. No, but actually, interesting topic. It actually came through my inbox on Monday. The fact that there are a couple of tools that have sprouted up that are very easy to use and are allow someone to just simply click and off you go versus the copy and paste, which has been around for a while, but we are working with Google to shut that down. It's been out there in the wild for a couple of years now, very low key, but it is starting to rumble up a little bit. But answering your question around, how do we? I think the question was, how do we think about this from a product perspective?
Yeah, because there's ways you're designing a product that is built in ways around its core purpose.
Right. Yeah, I mean there is this real fine line. I think you're going to see, publishers have to figure out a way to, to glean some cash and revenues from the digital media side, particularly if you're a print-based business. And there's a fine line, I think, between, my colleagues in the UK at the Times who went, full paywall, you hit the front page and you want to go anywhere else, you're paying. And then here domestically in the US, you've got Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal, which I think is a really nice mix of pay and free. It varies depending on the quarter and the year, 60-40, 50-50, but clearly we have distinct content that is behind a paywall. And social media is one good aspect as a product person where we look at how can we leverage social media to drive traffic back to the property and monetize it. And one thing that we found works really well for us at the Journal is, particularly with Twitter. And Twitter is interesting. If you have 140 characters, how do you maximize the folks coming back? And we found that it's the stat that really matters. It's, for example, we ran a story a couple months ago about overweight pets. And the tweet isn't, everybody's pet is overweight. The tweet is 50% of US pets are fat, right? It's that number, it's that stat, it's that gotcha. And we found that if we can leverage that stat or that little nugget, it drives great traffic for us. And we can drive traffic to a story that's not behind the paywall. That's a life and style story. So there's finding creative outlets for leveraging the content that's not behind the paywall in the hopes that, by bringing someone back and reading our content, we can show them what we are doing and therefore, pull a sub out of that.
Okay. So I think just a quick comment on that, and kind of a question I have then is, don't you think most of the social media, emerging media is just other ways of being able to monetize the content? And would the paid sort of go away? Because I remember years ago before we were, back then it was just selling banner ads online. There was premium content before we actually monetized and sold ads. I was in another research company, but we actually had a premium paid content report. So that publishers and advertisers could understand, okay, so who's paying for this stuff and who's not, and who are those people that are paying for it. And kind of to your point with the pets article, so Twitter would take a look at that and say, okay, this is a great way for our sales team to go out and talk to Nutromax or Purina or other advertisers to say, hey, here's a brand, here's a tweet talking about overweight pets. Great opportunity for you to brand that tweet and drive people to the Purina website, or to a TV ad that they can interact with.
And there's some really great companies out there that are starting to try and leverage that. Folks like Adly, for example, where they've created this, both a celebrity network that retweets. But also trying to marry up those types of stories with advertisers.
Right.
Very, very interesting.
So I'm just wondering, if kind of to your question, that the evolution of paid will sort of maybe go away at some point down the road because of these other ways of being able to monetize that content, because it certainly did, 5 to 7 years ago when we were first starting out.
Yeah, we're going back here.
So Greg, I think you made a really good point about the fact that you can't necessarily measure from just really one source anymore, right? So you're looking at trying to get the whole picture, and we deal with that too as well. And I work at Interbrand, and for our clients, we're trying to pull together, here's, this channel, you get great data from this source for this channel, but you don't get great data for this source, so we're looking at this source for this particular channel. And it kind of gives you that bigger mishmash of the whole picture.
Yep, it probably looks something like this.
Something like that, exactly. Where's the one pager?
Right.
But I guess what I'm curious about across the panel is where you find the biggest ROI. Because I think that what frustrated me when I was in PR and in advertising was there's not a whole lot of transparency into those big mass numbers as to what exact ROI I'm really getting, versus I can measure where a link goes. I can measure how many retweets I get. I can see what's actually happening and know the behaviors that are happening out of it. So what's the greatest ROI and how do you measure that?
If I can handle that. So we understand that clients want ROI. They want to understand the value of what they're purchasing. We've taken a somewhat unique approach by sort of redefining what ROI is. I mean, ROI is return on investment, and everyone thinks sales or accounts or what have you. But if you really think about what ROI truly stands for, it's return on investment. I gave CNN $2 million. What did I get in return? And right now, all they're getting is a post that says the number of 25, 54-year-olds that were reached. Well, there's a lot more we can tell you about the value of that buy. So we're providing advertisers with campaign-specific delivery of influentials, which is one of our unique selling propositions. Wall Street Journal talks about the tough scale nature of its audience, probably influentials as well. We're out there pitching that, buy us, you'll reach the influential. We're actually showing on the back end after the buy is executed and runs, look at your performance not just on your target demo, but on influentials. We have a deal in place with Arbitron where they're measuring, based on their PPM radio panel, the TV exposure to CNN content, both in-home and out-of-home. And we provide them with the advertiser actual log files for the minutes that those commercials aired. and we're able to provide the advertisers with, again, specific to their campaign, how many viewers were exposed outside the home that you can sort of use as a factor to apply the Nielsen numbers, because the Nielsen doesn't include that in its audience. And then the third thing is we also utilize Keller-Fay data, which measures offline word of mouth at the brand level, and we demonstrate a correlation of when you advertise on CNN, the conversations among CNN viewers for your product tends to spike. So there's lots of ways of trying to get at ROI that's maybe not the traditional sales. Again, I'm not a believer that you can ascribe the impact of one media in a huge media schedule to that one individual sale when there are thousands of factors that went into that sale. Probably driven more by distribution and price than anything in the media buy. So hopefully that answers your question, but there's many different ways of trying to get at that, and we try to be at the forefront of that.
I'm going to ask the new media metric question. So there's not a shared definition for engagement. Each media type would define it differently, and that's the problem. And then there's inherent strengths to each device and how you're consuming that media. So as a marketer, you have tough choices about, do I spend $1 million in print ads, or do I spend $1 million in something that I can see the return on, like a link or a click or paid search ad? So, do we need new metrics to measure this type of different types of engagement? And if so, how do we get there?
Greg, that sounds an awful lot like your television answer about a half hour ago. Go buy TV.
Yeah, well, you know what, engagement is very difficult to get at, and I think you mentioned engagement by media. The prevailing belief in TV engagement is that the longer the time spent viewing, so the more time you spend with a program or a network, the more engaged you are. Well, I don't believe in that. There's no research that supports that logical notion. I would argue that CNN's viewership, which consists mostly of people coming in and out of the network based on topics of interest, that are small TSV, our small time spent viewing, means we have higher engagement with our viewers because they're foregoing something they typically do. They don't typically watch CNN every day, but today they're going to watch CNN because the story that's going on today they care about. So these blanket definitions of engagement are very dangerous. They were in vogue a few years ago, as you mentioned. I think they've waned a little bit. I think you really need to look at campaign-specific, media brand-specific work, and I think it's really the onus is on us, with the media companies, to demonstrate the engagement with our product.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, the most valuable tools depend on the campaign goals.
Right.
Right.
Right, and that's a very good point. And I think we have to go beyond just traditional metrics and start using biometrics and trying to get a better understanding of the subconscious relationship with media that's going on.
Yeah, and I just might mention too, at Kantar, I mean, that's something that we are definitely exploring across all of the companies and the different media types that we measure. I'm sure that the other research companies like Nielsen and ComScore and others are out there thinking about the same thing, depending on what media they can measure. But you know, it's definitely, we've had lots of intercompany. I can't tell you how many conference calls over the last probably couple of months in terms of coming up with what are those types of metrics that best serve our clients. And it really has, you know, to Greg's point, it really has come down to campaign specific. How does that campaign perform in terms of reaching the right people? Not necessarily just demos, but behaviorally driven people as well. You know, the reach and the frequency and some of those key metrics are still, you know, still in there. But in addition to that, for instance, you know, there's maybe an effectiveness metric, however that might be defined based on the goal of the campaign. And then again, because advertisers are asking our clients, who are the agencies and the media companies, for this information, it's how do we go about integrating that offline sales or activity data with those metrics as well. So you could get one delivery on a campaign that includes your reach, your frequency, the people that you reached, the actual people that you reached, as well as how did that campaign affect online or offline activity. So did they go out and buy, or did they subscribe, or did they go to the website, or did they view the TV program? So.
If I could just add one more comment, because engagement has frustrated me for years. It's not, and the other aspect of it, looking at by media, I think there's a real opportunity to do some compelling research into the location of the exposure and the time of day of the exposure. I think that drives engagement much more than the actual medium. So, and there's been very little to no focus in that area. And if you're in the media planning or an actual marketer, I would suggest you focus a little bit more in that direction.
Let's take one final question.
Yeah, one more.
Thanks, Tom. I'd like to go in a whole different direction here and talk about measurement of annoyance, and that is, and I'll stick with television type media as the example, and the example I'll pick is the advertisement that sometimes flashes across your screen while you're trying to enjoy a program.
Are you talking about like a promo?
Promos or other things that sometimes flash across the screen, or perhaps the embedded advertising in a program, such as the talent shows with the advertising of products in the background, or things like that. How do you measure the annoyance factor?
Or is that something that I don't know if you do measure?
I mean, first of all, fortunately for CNN, we're not able to do it. Well, unfortunately for our sales force, we're not able to do any product placement. But that's a tough thing to measure. I think you can look at audience numbers to see if they sort of drop during those minutes. But based on anecdotal information, that hasn't occurred. So I think people might be slightly annoyed. You get used to it, and I don't think it's changing people's media consumption.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You go out there and you ask people, whether it's through surveys or panels, hey, what do you think about these ads? Oh, I hate them. I don't ever want to see another ad for the rest of my life. But certainly consumption's not saying that. And we did a little anecdotal research not too long ago. We've traditionally always run 15-second ads on our video, pre-rolls. And every now and then we'll get an advertiser say, I've got 30 seconds, we'll pay the extra money for a 30-second pre-roll. And if you twist our arm enough, we'll put it up there. And the interesting thing is, well, geez, what's the drop-off? Do we see drop-off now that we're doing 30-second ads? Guess what? Not a whole lot of drop-off. We saw about the same number of video views in a 5-minute period with 15 seconds versus 30. So, I mean, again, it's a small anecdotal piece of evidence, but you know what? Didn't change our consumption, our consumer consumption, a whole lot.
Right, but how are you measuring the return for the advertiser? Of they're actually getting some, positive or negative response to their product.
Yeah, no, and I see where you're going with that question. It is a hard thing to measure, right? I mean, we could go to the advertiser. Unfortunately, at least on the online side, we're going to serve out until the impression limit is met, and you're not really getting the annoyance factor in that.
Right.
Dart served it out, we're done. So it's actually a really good question. I don't know. There's probably the best way to do that is maybe panel it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways. I think they've been mentioned this evening, but there's a lot of ways to measure that performance or effectiveness of that campaign. You can even ask questions within the survey. Whether it's Nielsen or Dynamic Logic or Vizu or some of the other companies out there that actually measure ad effectiveness via survey or via a connection between the actual viewership of that ad with their behavioral activity, and that can be done through tagging or through panel-based measurement. You can determine, really, I think, in some ways, what the performance of that ad was in terms of driving certain activities, whether it's online or offline. You can ask, and we've done this in the past. We've asked in Dynamic Logic surveys. Some annoyance factor type questions. Did you like the ad? Did it give you the information you needed? Did you, enjoy the interaction with the ad based on rich media or video versus just a display banner that shows up and gives you what you need and you either click or you don't.
Or did you turn off the volume until the media you wanted to watch?
Right. There's been a lot of research too on click-through rates and the fact that they're really not that important. Those people that actually click through from a display banner are actually demographics and psychographics that most likely probably aren't going to be a target you want to go after. It typically is older females who play games online. Seriously, but you know, what happens beyond the exposure to the ads. So the fact that they don't click or do click, sort of what happens after that. And there's a lot of white papers from different research companies. You know, Kantar, Dynamic Logic, which one of the sister companies within Kantar. They've done a lot of work there. So does Nielsen and you know, some of the others.
But if I may, the video content that is presented and has embedded ads in the beginning now, you can't fast forward in a lot of them now. So you're forced to watch it or turn down the volume.
Well, you can
do something else for 15 or 30 seconds.
Some platforms will allow you to close out of the ad. You can close out and continue to watch the video. So you could opt out of viewing that ad.
A lot of the video content now you can't.
Right. Some you can.
One answer to your question is, media measurement is a very imprecise science. So even with TV, you know, Nielsen's been around for decades, they're not measuring actual viewership or listening. It's OTS, it's opportunity to see. That's why we keep using the word exposure. You're exposed to the ad. I don't know if anyone watched it or heard it.
They're not tracking who got it.
Yeah, we just know it was on the page.
So it's the same thing in the digital space. If you have a pre-roll and you minimize the screen while the pre-roll is going on, yes, you're considered exposed, but it's a reality of our business.
So I think we're going to stop the questions right here. I want to please join us in thanking our panel. They'll be sticking around afterwards for some